Welcome to our webinar on Inclusive Innovations, Resident-Centric Payment Processing in Government for Canada. My name is Michelle Hanley, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. We are thrilled to have you with us as we explore the latest advancements in payment processing within Canada based on the findings of the 2024 Resident and Agency Survey around the state of digital services delivery. Now, let me introduce our speakers. We are privileged today to have such a knowledgeable group with us to discuss the strides being made in inclusive resident-centric payment processing. Joining us is Julie, who was the former chief staff at Elgin County and is currently a director of Strategy Corp. Also, we have John Telch, the vice president for Canada from PayIt, joining us as well. Now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to John to get us started.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks so much for being here. And Julie, always pleased to see you in this venue. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. We're going to cover the digital adoption research that the study has demonstrated, some key trends in digital payments, a quick case study on the City of Toronto, how to champion digital payments in your organization, and of course, we'll save time for some Q&A. Just a quick background on PayIt in case you are unfamiliar or this is the first time you've heard from us in this kind of forum. We enable provincial and municipal government agencies to deliver on intuitive resident payment experiences that accelerate the shift to digital. We find that municipalities and provinces choose us to better achieve their mission through improved operational efficiency, customer support, and resident satisfaction. And below are some of our very common use cases. They are not limited to these, but we are always pleased to share more about these when the time is appropriate. So let's dive in to the findings of our survey. But before we do, and before we get into the demographic, I need to put Julie on the spot, as is my job, and ask you a loaded first question. First, if you could share a little bit about your experience as a CAO in the past and how you tackled or were presented with ideas of channel shift and service transformation. And then likewise, if you could share a little about the amazing work that you do in your current role to advise and support municipalities in all things from restructuring, finances, transformation, whatever it may be.
For sure. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, John. So in my former role as Chief Administrative Officer, and I spent about 6 or so years as a CAO, 20 years in total in government in a variety of leadership positions. But throughout my career, I focused on streamlining operations and enhancing service delivery, which in many cases naturally included upgrading digital. So for me, the key was always understanding the specific needs of the residents and finding ways to tailor those digital solutions in ways that not only met, but exceeded their expectations. So wherever possible, I tried to integrate that end user feedback or those mechanisms directly into the service platforms to ensure that ongoing and continuous improvement, because I always say it's not a once and done solution when it comes to digital transformation. It requires ongoing evaluation. So in terms of what I do now, I'm a director and management consultant, and my work with municipalities does involve quite a similar approach. We conduct needs assessments, we involve stakeholders in the planning process, and we end up recommending digital solutions and strategies to improve accessibility, efficiency, and really focus on that resident experience. So fostering strong communication channels between the municipality and their residents is what helps us and those municipalities ensure their digital services are not only meeting current demand, but definitely positioned to evolve in line with user expectations and technological advancements.
Amazing. Thanks for that. So for those who this is your first PayIt webinar, and in particular with myself and Julie, we're gonna do a little bit of role playing throughout the Q&A, as I'm a former political staffer and Julie is a former CAO. My joke perpetually is that Julie has the brains and thus I have the looks. But navigating these challenges that governments face and wanting to digitize, wanting to channel shift through the lens of both politics and public service, I think is really interesting. So let's dive in. Here's a snapshot of who responded to the study. broken down by gender identification and age group. I think the age group breakdown is really interesting of who, the 931 and the 59 plus generation, I think is really, really interesting. Here's a breakdown of which types of jurisdictions participated. We see that there was a big chunk from IT that participated. We had a bigger provincial contribution than we did municipal, but we also had quite a substantial contribution from what we might call line of business leaders. So that might be your CFOs, your revenue collectors, things like that, and 32% from municipal partners as well, which is wonderful. And we found, through the survey found rather, that there were three top findings that really bear greater explanation and depth. And the first was, in Canada in particular, there is a widespread increased adoption of digital payments. There is a demand for enhanced job tools without job loss, so capacity alleviation internally for municipal staff to ensure that things like tax season goes a bit smoother, but those jobs get to be retained, and hopefully folks in those jobs get to be positioned into more vital needs for the municipality or province in question. And of course, necessity for accessible and secure government services, where we're going to dive in a little bit more. So I'm going to pause here for a question, Julie, and ask that, we know from the survey, and we're going to see in a few slides, that the majority of Canadian governments at all levels are accepting some kind of digital payment. If you are posed with the question by, say, a upstart mayoral chief of staff who's been told by his boss that the municipality must accept digital payments starting yesterday, and said chief of staff comes bearing down on your door and says, Julie, this is the mandate from on high, we got to do this. Where do you find that separation and the importance of the separation of an experience that is just kind of like maybe a one-click, could be like a third party on the government's website experience, or something that has a little more depth and is geared towards the resident? Like, how do you prioritize that, and how do you navigate that in the CAO's chair?
I think as a CAO, you really want to focus on, creating a seamless and intuitive and secure interface that is aligned with what it is that they are saying they need in this digital solution. So for, an enhanced, say, digital payment experience, it goes beyond just accepting payments. It has to be easy to use. It has to be something that they are looking for. And the difference really lies in how well that service integrates with other municipal services as well. So thinking about the broad spectrum of what municipalities do, and the level of customer support provided, and whether that platform is adaptable to future needs. I'd also say, beyond all of those kind of features, providing a personalized experience, like remembering user preferences and offering customizable dashboard views, can really help enhance user satisfaction. And I think that's what residents are looking for most. It's these personal touches that really help residents feel connected to the government and the municipal services that they're accessing, and encourages ongoing engagement and fosters that trust that they're looking for with local government. So I think municipalities can do the bare minimum, and some of them have to, even as an entry point to digital transformation, but have to be aware and cognizant of the risk of losing that emphasis on customer experience, because that's what they're looking for most.
Oh, brilliant. We'll definitely get a little more into that as we go. Continuing with the study. So speaking of that digital first mindset, some really fascinating figures here on the percentage of Canadian governments that are accepting digital payments today, with provinces leading the way, which in a sense is not surprising given all of the economic challenges provinces have to manage and the relevant payments that come in, followed by counties and swiftly by municipalities afterwards. And I think this is, I think these numbers are really significant in that it shows that there's not really a one size fits all perspective on the need to accept payments digitally. And I think, a lot of what you said, Julie, really plays into that of, every municipality is different and has to, attack this problem in a unique way. We know that from the study in Canada, about 50% of revenue is currently collected digitally. And of course, that varies on the government in question and the type of transaction that might be and what the service might look like. But not everybody is satisfied with the technology that is at their disposal. So about 1 out of 10 of our respondents from government said that they were less than satisfied with the technology that they were required to use every day, which is quite interesting. And I want to get into the next couple slides in a moment, because we asked in the study what were the top concerns? Why weren't you satisfied? What are the things that you're thinking about when you're making these big digital shifts? And the first was navigating the complexity of data security, compliance, and other regulatory frameworks, which of course varies per government level. And the other was the concern of addressing accessibility barriers. So perhaps I'm going to pause there and ask Julie another loaded and big question, which is you're in the CAO's chair, or you're meeting with the executive team of the municipality or the province, and you now have to tackle two really important things, which is how do we ensure that the platform that we build, the experience that we build, is safe and secure, and residents can trust it, and government can vouch for it, which is as of equal or if not more importance. And how do we ensure it's accessible? How do we make sure that no one gets left behind? So I know that those are really big ideas, but how would you go about understanding them? And the reason I pose that question in particular is, as a former political mind, that's not often the consideration when you're looking for some kind of win or policy change, as you're looking for the end of the press release, the good news story, not the machinery and the plumbing that has to get you there, which is security and accessibility. So I'd love your perspective on both of those.
Yeah, I'd say both of those are top of mind for municipalities in particular, because municipalities are both obligated and I would say very interested in prioritizing accessibility and security right from the outset of designing a digital experience. So this involves adhering to accessibility standards and ensuring robust data protection protocols are in place. And generally, municipalities have policies and programs to support both accessibility and security. So it would be ensuring alignment with any sort of digital solution with existing policies and practices. But I do think there is a role residents can play in testing new technologies, as well, in involving feedback loops or mechanisms can really help municipalities identify and address accessibility issues early on. And I suggest that be done in like a sandbox type environment before it go live, when changes are harder to make. But if municipalities regularly check in on accessibility features to ensure compliance with legislative requirements and conduct regular security audits to update their systems in response to emerging threat, then it's that proactive approach that not only secures the digital environment, but also provides reassurance to residents that their data is protected, which is paramount. Again, I'll reinforce that whole maintaining and promoting public trust in government. So I do think, these are both very sensitive issues for municipalities, but very much front burner issues for all of our municipal clients, that's for sure.
No, brilliant. And following up to that, let's say that in the municipality in question, you're about to undertake this work and you haven't really heard via, let's say, constituent mail, email, write-in, town hall meetings, you haven't heard specifically, we want to see massive digital transformation, but from whether it's the last election or polling or surveys, that service transformation and service improvement are really important to residents. So even though you don't have that, so 500 people wrote a petition and want digital payments, would you still advise municipalities go out and talk to your residents and understand what they want to see?
100%. And municipalities are engaging with their communities all the time through, public information centers associated with planning, as an example, or a municipal survey associated with the development of a new strategic plan. So baking in some engagement into pre-existing engagement opportunities is a great strategy, but you're unlikely to get a petition for a new service with a bunch of signatures that says we want a new digital payment platform. So instead, you have to recognize they don't know what they don't know. So they may not know what's available to them. They also may not know what are kind of the critical efficiencies that the municipality would like to achieve. So getting the public's help or the community's help in prioritizing what's most important to them as they interact with governments is critically important. It is something that, John, I talk about all the time is, I can't overstate the importance of engaging the community, especially when it comes to something that they will be using as an end user.
That's perfect. All right. So an interesting finding that really came to the forefront in the study is that digital adoption really is age agnostic. And you'll see some things later in the deck that really reiterate that. But if you look at the percentage of our respondents, the age range is really all over the map in a really positive way. So, I think there are a lot of myths out there that say that, well, it's only going to be your younger citizens that want things to be digital, but we just know that not to be true, and that, lots of people are looking to digital transformation for different things, which brings me to the next slide, which is, in both demographics that we highlight here, Gen Z and millennials do care about the environment, and that fueled their answers in the survey. Both of those generations made clear in the study that they hope to see digital payments as a means of better environmental practices for government, be it the province or a municipality or a region. That, if I don't have to receive that manila envelope in my mail for a payment, while one envelope may not matter, 50,000 envelopes really does matter, and also helps to drive things like cost efficiency. So going back to the resident engagement piece, because this is really important to me, and I think it would be a shame if the environmental piece was lost. Julie, how would you advise a municipality to ensure that not only in the planning to execute digital payments, but the engagement with residents, that this isn't lost? How do you make sure that they understand there's actually an environmental benefit here, that we could cut down on paper billing, and whoever's doing paper billing in the back office, they can now be, we're not going to make them redundant. We're going to reposition them to do work that is more important than, quite frankly, stuffing envelopes in tax season. So how do you get those, if you want to call them knock-on benefits across, because they are important, and we have the data to show that people are thinking about it?
I'd say when it comes to the environmental benefits, this is something that, again, is a front burner issue for municipalities. A lot of municipalities are undertaking or have completed climate change action plans, as an example. So, they're looking to the corporation or the municipality to be leaders in this regard. So I think there's an educational role and a strategic communications role that municipalities can play to support this, like an educational campaign that highlights the positive impacts of going digital for payment transactions, as an example, like reducing paper and lowering carbon footprints. I also think, to your other point, John, there's incentives for residents, not necessarily monetary incentives in all cases in terms of, offset, tax increases, those sorts of things. But a switch to digital options in terms of incentive can mean an expedited experience, which encourages adoption. It can also mean stronger alignment with their priorities for a more efficient local government. So, not necessarily reducing positions that support, tax collection, as an example, but recognizing that those resources can be reallocated to other areas that might have a great impact on customer experience as well. So lots of spin-off potential when it comes to digital transformation and innovation, but I think those messages can be amplified if municipalities are able to showcase tangible results like metrics, how much paper was saved, what are the cost savings associated with this, and sharing that widely through different channels like social media, through newsletters, even at community events. Whenever you're engaging or interfacing with the public, it's a great opportunity to celebrate successes. And municipalities tend to be understated and lose sight of the things they should be communicating out as wins. Kind of transparent approach not only educates, but it builds community around digital transformation and sustainable practices.
Amazing. So that we talk a lot about it at PayIt, and poor Julie has heard this broken record slide from me many times, is that we think it's really important, and the reason that we are talking about this is that we find a lot of governments we speak to as well have this same vision of the resident is at the center of everything. And if you deliver services, particularly digital payments, that have that in mind, you will increase satisfaction. So going back to some of the things that Julie was talking about, you test, you get feedback from users in that sandbox environment. You make sure that you are devoting research to develop their understanding, their level of literacy. We speak to that a lot when we are working with our partners about, not everybody has the same reading level or web literacy. As a result, whatever platform the government in question puts forward really has to reflect all levels, all demographics within the public. And that couldn't be more important. And I think it just really ties in nicely to what you were saying, Julie, about resident engagement, and also doing the difficult thing for a lot of governments, which is to take credit for good work and highlight things like, hey, if we get rid of paper billing or 90% of paper billing, now there is a $50,000 placeholder in our budget for something else, which is really valuable to municipalities of all shapes and sizes. Moving on to some of the findings about positive payment experiences, which also help drive satisfaction, just as any other interaction in your daily life. If you work with a good product, if you work with a good environment, you are much likely to use it again, or maybe refer to a friend. So if you had a good experience, we saw that 71% of folks would recommend the service to others. There was a 47% rating of trusting the government agency more, which I think is really interesting. I mean, we, both of us in our different roles look at things like the Canadian Government Trust Survey that comes out every year that shows where the average citizen feels their government is on a trustworthy scale. Of course, things like a COVID-19 pandemic and various communications issues during that time can really sway things. So there is a lot of work to be done to get that trust up, but a great government service can actually really boost those numbers. We saw 36% had such a great experience that they would post about the service on social media. And I've said this before in other environments where we've spoken together, Julie, but as a political staffer, I mean, I would take this number and I would frame it. If I had 36% of constituents willing to go out on social media and say, hey, I found this service easy to use, I loved it. I mean, that's a huge number. And then there are also knock-on benefits of, those electeds that are overseeing the ministry or the municipality department saw this as realized this as a political win, as better service means happier people, better trend at the ballot box. And, I want to look at the other side of this coin, Julie. So we know that 50% of payments, all levels of government, are online, but there is some dissatisfaction with what's available at times or the choices that were made. So if you're a municipal leader like you have been, how can you, let's say that you've come to the CAO's chair and you've inherited the mandate from someone else. There are digital payments, but low utilization, not much for an experience. The resident really isn't bought in. How do you go about changing that around to turning that around to drive results? What are the things that you would be thinking about in that case?
I have a few thoughts. I think to turn those poor experiences into positive ones, municipal leaders really need to listen for feedback and act on it. So understanding the customer journey and identifying those pain points through the information that you have at hand. So information from residents, but also feedback from your staff and the staff who are supporting the integration of services or the implementation of these payment platforms, as your example indicated. So using that information to guide either iterative improvements or to identify a new solution that might better align with what staff are looking for and what the community is looking for. I think more than anything, residents are looking for a digital experience that is consistent and reliable, but also they're looking to have a positive experience with their first interaction with that digital platform. So you have to build that trust, encourage continued use, and if you lose some users through a poor experience, then re-engage them through enhanced communications, engaging them in helping identify this, the next generation of what's to come for that service. But if the end users see and experience positive changes within a system, they're more likely to be ongoing adopters. And maybe they'll even try some other digital solutions the municipality's trying out. I think there could be a staff training element here as well. So ensuring that staff are well positioned to help promote the services that are available and walk end users through how to use this new platform is often time and money well spent, and will help gather some further insights, which will help personalize the experience and lead to ongoing resident satisfaction.
Perfect. In the survey, the question was asked, why would why upgrade the service? Is it something that you're thinking about? The search for resident trust was really rated highly at all levels as something to really be sought after, which I think is really important and positive. A couple questions I have about upgrading, Julie, that I'd love you to talk us through, which is, you've come to the decision as a government, provincial, municipality, regional, whatever it may be, that you are going to upgrade your digital offering. You're going to upgrade to a single resident profile that would allow you to do, 10 things or 12 things. And the challenge that is being presented to you is that, okay, that's great, but what we've outlined here, Julie, already has 26 disparate systems that are outdated, or we're paying for, of those 26, we're paying for 16 different subscriptions, and we have to figure out which ones to turn off. And with that resident laser focus, like, what does the resident want? Where might you start there? Maybe it's as a CAO, maybe as a CFO. Like, where would you start the conversation about passing that barrier or getting over that barrier?
I think I would approach it in a couple of different ways. So I think these barriers are significant, but not insurmountable. I think as a first priority, it's important to establish a champion from within who can help navigate this, help with the interdepartmental collaboration. In terms of like strategy and methodology and approach, I think strategic planning is at the forefront, clear priority setting, and identifying mechanisms to foster that interdepartmental collaboration are really pretty early in the process. And securing executive sponsorship. So whether this is driven by council because of what they're hearing in the community, or by the CAO, or by the IT director or chief information officer, there's a need for municipalities to bring all of those priorities together into a broader organizational goal that will help ensure those projects, which are often plentiful, are getting the type of support and resources that they need in order to be implemented. So we're seeing amongst our clients, municipalities are considering phased approach to integration. So identifying or using criteria in order to help prioritize which solutions to roll out first, and taking an incremental approach is often realistic when you're considering all of the competing priorities and the budget pressures municipalities are facing. So picking off that low-hanging fruit, build momentum, demonstrate some quick wins, build that confidence among stakeholders. And stakeholders, I also mean council. So get council's buy-in, that there's a return on investment for the digital transformation, and then secure that ongoing buy-in within the community so that the adoption rate is there as well for these digital transformation efforts.
Excellent. So another question, and you and I have spoken about this before, but I think it's really valuable for particularly those who are facing a mandate to upgrade services, but there's that question of where to start and what's the best practice. And of course, every government is different. Every government has different needs, but putting yourself in the CAO chair and you've made the decision as a team or individually that we are going to move forward with upgraded services, and you are now weighing the cost benefit, whatever you want to call it, of should we make a made in government solution or should we seek outside partnership? And how would you navigate that? And what are the things that you would consider, the big ideas that you would consider in that debate?
So again, I think there are a lot of different things to look at and consider when you're thinking about a build versus buy solution. One is looking internally. Does your team have the skills and the capacity to develop this and not just develop it, but support it on an ongoing basis? Also quantifying what are the costs associated with their work in developing this solution is important, because if their time is spent developing a solution, then it means that they're not working on something else, because municipalities don't have limitless resources. So I think while in-house solutions provide some control, and they often lack the scalability and security that comes with some established platforms. So partnerships with experienced providers can advance technology and expertise, reduce long-term costs in many instances. So it's not just the cost of buying the product, it's considering the lifespan of the investment, both for in-house and outsourced solutions, and figuring out how ongoing updates will take place. So how will you ensure your system remains up to date with both security practices, but also as technology evolves? So I think municipalities do have to take or be intentional in their approach and not lose sight of the fact that external partners can really bring a new perspective to problem solving in some instances. At least that's been my experience, where introducing innovative solutions that sometimes my internal teams, who are often very busy navigating the day-to-day challenges of municipal work, might be overlooking because they're very busy in their jobs. This can lead to more efficient services, improved end user experiences, and it's those sorts of things that make partnership a really attractive option for a lot of municipalities who are aiming to enhance their digital capabilities.
Oh, brilliant. I think that's really sage counsel. I mean, there's so many directions that one can go in that sense. And I think that, another thing to consider is that there are really smart people that work for municipalities, regions, provinces, and partnership is not limiting that intelligence. I view it, and I think it's important to view it as enhancing their capabilities, because there are so many issues of the day that might take precedent and derail an internal effort. So I think those considerations are really well-founded. Moving on, because we are slowly running out of time, and I will try to catch us up. About the customer experience piece, we know that great experience will boost engagements, and this helps with collecting revenue faster and greater resident satisfaction, of course. And going now to trend number 2 of operational efficiencies being in demand. We know that government staff in Canada are focused on finding things that will help enhance their jobs. And I mean, a pretty constant thing that we hear in all aspects of government today, not just technology, not just finance, is that unfortunately, post-pandemic and other economic challenges have made it harder to get as many mandates completed, to do as many things as previously possible. So there is a greater search happening for a need to find technology to provide some of that offsetting, that retooling, making sure that the smart folks in a municipality, in a province, are working on the things that best serve the public. And some of the barriers, the key barriers that exist to upgrading a digital experience, probably not surprising the top 3, but worth mentioning, that there are budget constraints, lack of interagency alignment, that lack of a champion, the lack of mandate, and competing, particularly information technology priorities or competing projects, and not enough oxygen for everybody to get their work done. So if we look at these sort of top 4 barriers to upgrading payment platform systems, I'm going to ask you another question, Julie, which, based on these, if you're a government, you're facing these, I understand, like, these are big ideas, and they're not, it's not simple to overcome them. But I believe personally that it's worth it. If you agree that these aren't insurmountable challenges, how do you create that internal alignment to alleviate these challenges? And I know we don't have time to go through all 4 of them in depth, but just generally would love your perspective on, if this is what you're facing, how would you calm the team down and say, we can do this, it's worth it, and here's where I would start.
Yeah, so I'd say the best strategy is to come up with a holistic strategy, or an IT services strategy, modernization strategy, transformation strategy that contemplates each of these barriers and identifies clear solutions, or helps prioritize each of the competing issues, or what's going to come first. So it's more of like the development of a road plan that's going to help solicit buy-in from the senior leadership team too, who each wants their own tech solution or ability to make work more efficient within their service area as well. So having some sort of overarching plan that closely aligns with council's strategic plan, and any feedback received from the community, or feedback from the community to inform the plan, will help overcome, or at least plan for, these barriers. Because I can tell you, these barriers are not going away for municipalities. So it is just a matter of being intentional about them and thoughtful about them, and involving people from across the organization, the community when possible, to help inform and develop that plan.
That's excellent. I appreciate that. Just going to keep going through the survey here so we can get through the study, so we can get to some Q&A. So we saw that in municipal governments, there was a 46% push to have one system for many payments, which is something that we talked about previously. Likewise, 33% in provincial government agencies. So moving now to accessibility and security, which we've already spoken about a little bit. We know that 1 in 3 government respondents to the study really wanted to focus on driving resident trust, and particularly through the lenses of accessibility and security, which are excellent places to start there. And we know that these pieces are top of mind. So as you can see from our breakdown here on the pie chart, accessibility takes the shape of 23%, and data security compliance at 19%. So, agencies are thinking about it, CTOs are thinking about it, CAOs are thinking about it, which is I think great. And I think something that deserves a shout out as well is the limited channels piece. Offering limited payment channels or disparate payment channels is something that drives inconvenience, and inconvenience leads to dissatisfaction. So it seems to be that typically municipalities and provinces in Canada are thinking the same way, which I think is amazing. We focus a lot on accessibility. We have an accessibility team, and we'll speak about this a little more later as well, but we really like to focus on, if we're partnering with a government, what are their needs, and not just from a legal standpoint, like being in top compliance with the Ontarians for Disabilities Act for our Ontario users, for example, but you, being the government in question, know your residents the best. So what kind of needs they might have, what digital literacy exists, what doesn't exist. Maybe there are things that you need to include because they haven't been able to be provided in the past. Like maybe there's solutions for those who are hard of hearing or hearing impaired or visually impaired. And so we work with you to make sure that your perspective on that is heard. And again, that's, I think, really plays into what Julie said about, surveying in the sandbox and making sure that you're taking a group of residents who really represent the whole community. Their needs are all met. And that's something that you do well before launching. And I think that's really important. On the accessibility piece as well, we can work with you to make sure that we serve your most vulnerable residents, which is really, really important. And our designs will always reflect that. Just going to go quickly into our case study with the City of Toronto for those who are not familiar, so that we can get to some questions. So going into demands, if you want to call it, from Toronto residents, of which I am one, so this does sound a lot like me. I want to have secure identity, payment, and profile in one place. I want my municipal services in one place, allow me to do things all in one. I need notifications, I need engagement, I need it to be convenient, make it about me. This really sounds like a glimpse into my brain, and describes my ego quite well. Hear me, make the experiences reflect what I need to do. And as a user, I would say that they do that. They reflect the other digital interactions I have in my day-to-day life, which make it convenient. Just a quick glance of our implementation to date. In January 2021, we launched property taxes and utilities. We then moved over to parking fines, introduced e-billing, and pre-authorized for both utility and property tax, which we've found great success with, and I'm also a user of that. I want to set it and forget it. I want to know that I'm being compliant with my government. I'm paying my taxes on time. I'm paying my utility bill on time, and that is something that the city was not able to do previously. And I think something that's really worth mentioning, because really this is not about PayIt. This is about the governments that responded to our survey and those that are watching, is that in Toronto, customer experience modernization is a journey, not a destination. So Toronto gets a ton of credit for always thinking about how they can improve the resident experience through whichever vehicle that might be. What else can we do? How do we make it easier to rent a city bicycle? And having a department dedicated to customer experience, I think, has really made Toronto a leader in this sense, and they've been a wonderful partner for us throughout the engagement. And just a quick slide on showing our year-over-year growth in services. And again, this is more so to highlight for those governments on the webinar that the win is out there, the success is out there, the engagement for you is out there, that you will see growth and you will see resident satisfaction if you keep the resident in mind when you bring these. My favorite slide that we have, which is, from that sandbox environment that Julie talked about. This was an early survey that we did with Toronto residents using My Toronto Pay. And my favorite one is in the bottom left, which is a gentleman who says, by his own admission, I'm 76 years old. I know nothing about IT, and this works for me. Thank you. And again, if I was a chief of staff somewhere, I would take this and I would frame it, and I would maybe send it to my mother, because you don't often hear when you're doing a good job. And I think that that's really special, because again, we have these myths that the study dispels, that young people want digital service transformation, and we have a gentleman who's 76 who is a user, and I think that's really really unique. I'm going to turn it over to Julie one last time before the Q&A. Just to reiterate what you said before, Julie, how do you find that champion? How do you, you can be that champion yourself. How do you delegate to find that champion?
It's often not as much about delegation as it is that you likely already know who that champion is, because they're the innovator within the municipality. They're coming forward with ideas for how to improve services, how to make things more efficient. So positioning them as a champion often just means giving them the tools and resources they need to be successful. So empowering them to work across different departments to, gather information and or identify, and supporting them as a senior leadership team in doing what it is that they want to do, which is find new solutions and digital innovation across the municipality. So it's just a matter of picking who it is and positioning them for success.
Amazing. With that, I will hand it back over to Michelle to pull some questions.
Thank you, both John and Julie, for your fantastic insights. We'll now move on to the Q&A portion. I also want to point out, if you have any questions for our presenters, feel free to enter them in the box to the right. If we run out of time during this, we'll be sure to follow up with you directly after. Question number 1. To start, you both highlighted the importance of accessibility and data security in digital government services. What specific measures can government agencies implement to ensure their platforms are accessible to all residents, including those with limited digital literacy or disabilities, and compliant with complex data security regulations? And that one, I think I'll pass over to John to start first.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So as a former government advisor and now doing what I do and being a consultant before that, I think one phrase always burns in my head, and that is know the power of words. And one of our colleagues at PayIt, who runs our operations and client success, she phrases it differently. She says, words matter. And that's why we're friends. But that sounds like a really simple explanation, but I really do think that's the most important. If your residents cannot understand, first of all, what you are trying to achieve, what you are asking them to do, and why that matters to them, unfortunately, you'll miss the mark. So that means you have to think about things like digital literacy and even reading levels. So we ensure that anything we would put out in working with a government partner is at a 4th grade reading level, because you just never know who might be using it, and that shouldn't be a barrier to great service. So it needs to capture everybody in a way that's easy to digest, easy to understand. I think the importance of surveying and testing and resident engagement, as Julie mentioned, couldn't be more important, because maybe there's someone in the community who, for example, has a hearing impairment. They have yet to find a digital experience that really works for them, but they want to. So that is a person that is so worth engaging and getting their perspective on, because if for organizations like ours, for government, we're never really satisfied with the service that we're providing. So we want to get better, and that's a great way to get better. Julie, I'd love to turn it over to you for any additional thoughts.
I would say it's important to try to reach as many residents as possible, to encourage adoption, whether that be by ensuring that their personal information is protected or that their accessibility needs are met. So digital literacy is also something I consider to be accessibility when it comes to the adoption of digital solutions. So when it comes to accessibility in particular, I think municipalities often have, I think they're obligated to have a joint accessibility committee as an example. So engaging some existing committees or volunteers that are known to the municipality is a helpful tool in getting them to try out new services and technology. I think my experience has been that they'll provide really robust feedback and honest and candid feedback that saves you some steps once you fully implement something and kind of reeling it back in and going backwards. But often municipalities are running 100 miles an hour, and it's hard to stop and think about all of these steps, these interim steps. And one is, don't be afraid to ask for help and engage your community. Often these folks are already known to the municipality. Then my other thought is just look to what other municipalities are doing in terms of best practices. So we are seeing a lot of municipalities who are fearful of cyber attacks, because the common phrase is, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So making those cybersecurity measures are in place, and that you're communicating what those measures are to the public so that they feel confident giving their personal information to you as government, and that you will be good stewards of that information is critically important. And just fostering a sense of digital inclusion. So giving people the opportunity, if they are struggling to access some sort of digital platform, how can they let you know? And how will you act on that feedback? So responding to their concerns and touching base with them is critically important to close that feedback loop.
Awesome. That's great. Looks like we have one other question that came in, and this one I'll hand over to Julie. You both mentioned that 50% of Canadian provincial governments digitally collect most of their payments. What strategies or best practices have these governments implemented to achieve such high levels of digital payment adoption?
Well, I think this dovetails nicely with what we were just talking about. So I think best practices means they're on the cutting edge of data protection, security, cybersecurity, and accessibility features. But I would also say it has to do with a focus on customer experience. And so something we've talked about a lot through today's webinar is that's another best practice that is leading people to enhanced adoption, which is maybe our users are satisfied as is, but how can we make that even better? And how can we use that as a launching pad to other opportunities for efficiencies within the municipality or other digital platforms or services that could be adopted?
Awesome. John, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think Julie captured it really well. I think there's a balance to be struck between the roadmap, the future view that you want of maybe you want 23 services, but start with 3, start with 2, start with 4 really high impact services, gain the public trust, make it easy for people, listen to what they want it to do. And once you have that really strong foundation, then it's time to start implementing the roadmap. And the other thing I would advise as well is those that are really getting it right and are really satisfied are those that have really taken into consideration, what does the resident want it to do? And that is the differentiator between a sort of flimsier service that is just kind of there because it needs to be there, and those that actually make positive change and drive those numbers that the survey demonstrated.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to our speakers today as we end our webinar. We hope you found today's sessions valuable and that it sparks new ideas and discussions within your own organizations.